My biggest advice is to show up for yourself. Know that you're worth it. Know that your value in the world is important, and we need you to authentically show up as yourself in order to change the world.
This is the Happen to Your Career podcast with Scott Anthony Barlow.
We help you stop doing work that doesn't fit you, figure out what does, and make it happen.
We help you define the work that is unapologetically you and then go get it.
If you feel like you were meant for more and you're ready to make a change, keep listening.
Here's Scott.
Here's Scott.
Here's Scott.
When you first begin considering a career change, it's impossible to predict all the obstacles that could get in your way. But there is one obstacle that I am 100% sure, without a doubt, will be there. What is that obstacle? Well, drum roll, please. It turns out it's you. Yep, the biggest obstacle standing in the way of your ideal career is you. Your indecision, doubts, overthinking tendencies, procrastination, comfort zone, all of it is keeping you from what will likely be the best decision for your career and your life. You might be like, but Scott, how do I know if a career change will be the right move for my career? Well, we went to people that had already done the work to make an intentional career change and ended up with their ideal role doing what they consider to be meaningful work that leverages their strengths. And all these people, we asked the same question over and over again. That question, what advice would you give someone who's considering making a career change, but don't know if they should? I've actually now asked this question to thousands of people, many of whom have worked with us to change careers. And we used all of that data, of course, to write our book, Happen to Your Career, an Unconventional Approach to Career Change and Meaningful Work. But since we couldn't fit in 1,000 people in a podcast episode, what we did is we chose 7 pieces of advice from clients of ours. These are people who, just like you, were unhappy or bored or felt like they were meant for more or had health issues that were linked to their career. So some of these people were in great situations and it just wasn't the right fit. Other people were in pretty terrible situations. The commonality is they all found work that they felt was meaningful, and all of them made a change, starting with deciding to take action towards that meaningful work. Here's what's interesting about their advice. It's all possible. Everything is possible. None of them, 0 of them, found magic beans and climbed the beanstalk to their ideal careers. Everything they did to find their ideal career is attainable. You just have to get out of your own way. I want you to listen first to Maggie. Maggie's story, she started actually to get some clues that her role as a media coordinator wasn't the best fit when she realized everyone else around her was really into their work, and she was just not at that level of interest. She did a great job of digging into her strengths and identifying a role that fit her as well as her strengths. And in a sense, used that knowledge to continually pivot into roles that align with her ideals. Since that time, Maggie has been promoted not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 times, each time into a role that fit her even better. So what advice would she give?
The advice that I would give that person is advice that my brilliant, wise husband has given me, and the time is passing, whether you are participating in your life or not. So go do the thing. Even if it's just one step forward, that's one step closer than you were yesterday. Even if that step doesn't work out and it's a misstep, it's something that you can cross off your list, but the time is passing. So what are you going to do with the rest of the revolutions you have around this planet? Like, let's just keep moving forward, even if it's something small that gives a little bit of progress. Eventually that momentum is going to pick up, and it could be a little bit scary. It's like getting to the high dive and you just creep a little bit closer and you look over the edge until you finally jump in. But the time is passing anyway. So do something with it.
Nancy had helped to start an events management company and worked there for 20 years when she had the revelation that she was lacking autonomy in her career. Yes, this can even be the case for a co-owner of the company. She wasn't able to lead her team in the ways she desired, and she wasn't spending as much time with her family as she wanted, and she desperately needed a change. She decided to have what she described as the most difficult conversation of her life with her CEO and fellow founder, letting him know that she was leaving the company. From there, Nancy took the time to really slow down and figure out what would make her next role the absolute best role for her career in life. All of her hard work paid off when she found a role that not only gave her the autonomy she desired, but also checked every other box of her ideal career checklist.
I just decided that it was time. I was just after so much angst and discomfort and unhappiness. And I think the advice is if you're feeling that way, listen to yourself. Life is short and just listen to the voices that are speaking to you. Everything will be okay. Like if you're a smart professional, you'll figure it out. You'll find a way to figure it out. Just life is too short to be so unhappy and to be wondering if there's something better. So I think, it can be scary, but it will be okay.
Erin's story starts with making several career changes. She went from owning her own cleaning company to real estate to working her way up the corporate ladder at Dell. She was extremely proud of her accomplishments. She was a single mom, so she had definitely felt the pressure over the years to make sure that she had an income in one way or another. Okay, interesting thing with Erin's story. She realized somewhere along the line that all the elements that she was missing in her work at Dell could actually be fulfilled by real estate. And that having done real estate in the past and owning her cleaning company all those years ago had actually been on the right track of what a fulfilling career was for her. It was just the wrong timing and it was just the wrong situation. Now, this realization actually gave her the courage to leave her corporate role and take the leap into real estate full time. It wasn't her first rodeo, but it definitely was the best decision she could have made for her particular career. One other interesting note about Erin is that her story really illustrates how someone's career can continue to evolve and get refined in ways that we can't always anticipate. Here's what Erin had to say when I asked her about what advice she would give.
I would definitely say that you've got to embrace that you don't know what you don't know. And that if you're feeling at all dissatisfied with where you're at, or like maybe there's something more, then you've got to go down every hallway and look in every nook and cranny to figure out what's your sweet spot. And we can get really small worlds in work, and we can have absolutely no clue what else is out there. And honestly, I mean, this is the truth. It's because I was listening to your podcast and I just loved hearing people's stories that I realized there's something out there that's the perfect fit for me. I don't know what it is and I need some help figuring it out, but I believe I'm going to find that thing that's perfect for me.
Larry had been working in what many would call his passion for his entire career. He was a head brewer at a brewery where he got to know every aspect of beer. Sounds pretty great, right? Well, it was. He loved it for many years. And then he hit a wall, and it was no longer great. And that, as it turns out, it happens. It's real life. And he didn't know what his next step should be until he began doing the work to figure out what he was missing at that point in his life. Through this work, he realized he could take all of his knowledge from his years in the brewery, combine it with his love of finance, and become a financial coach, consulting breweries on how to be financially successful. Pretty cool, right? Here's the advice Larry gave.
There's a few things that come to mind. It's one that my wife likes to say, and it's leap and the net will appear. Really, really difficult to do. I get that. Really, really difficult to do. Yet, if your mindset is thinking positively in that direction, it happens. I think another piece of advice is don't wait, because I didn't talk about how it took me way too long to leave that last job, even though it was probably 2 or 3 years that I knew I needed to be out of there. And yeah, don't wait. It may seem really, really difficult that you can't, and you got to wait this out, yet you will feel so much better. And it's not the first time. I've left 2 jobs under duress. And the first time I did it, I should have done it sooner. And this last time, I should have done it sooner. So yeah, don't wait.
Meet Kat. Kat had immigrated to the United States, graduated from college, and years later found herself feeling stuck with no idea of how to progress her career. She'd always envisioned that she would find her ideal role in the corporate world, and that achievement would be the final piece of the puzzle that would make everything else in her life fall into place. Here's what she didn't realize. A service industry job that she had been working in for over a decade just to get by was actually checking almost all the boxes. So strangely, it turned out that the work she needed to do wasn't actually making a big change for industries or careers. Instead, it was clarifying her vision and challenging her own limiting beliefs. Kat ended up staying in the same industry, getting promoted in her restaurant role, and began teaching salsa classes on the side. Combined, these multiple opportunities gave her every single thing she defined would make up her ideal career. Pretty crazy, right? So what advice would Kat give?
Well, the first thing I would say is that if you don't do something differently, you won't get different results. So every time I acted on something or attempted at something, it would land me in a slightly different position where I would see other paths for development or for pursuit. However, because of my own limitations of my own mind, my own thinking, my upbringing, my experiences, I would end up making the same decisions in how to approach those opportunities. So I think that aside from don't be afraid to try things, because that will land you in the new environment where you may recognize new opportunities. But if you're of anything of a mindset that I had, then don't be afraid to ask for help. Because if you're thinking the same way over and over again, it doesn't matter what situations are coming at you, because you won't make new decisions, because you're set in your ways of how you process things. So you need someone who will show you, sometimes gently, sometimes not so gently, but they will show you how to look at the situation from a slightly different vantage point.
Okay, here's the thing. I want you to meet Travis. And Travis had been all over the map working in healthcare. Even so, he still felt like he was called to do more and kept getting very bored in every role that he held. He is a registered nurse, a board certified healthcare leader. He holds a doctorate in nursing and health innovation, yet he still felt like he was lacking his why and thought that if he could just figure out that one thing, then he would finally feel like he'd reached his career goal. Spoiler alert, these days, Travis finally feels at peace with where his career is, but it's not because he found that one single thing that he's going to do for the rest of his entire life. Although he did land a really awesome opportunity as the director of healthcare at Indeed.com, he also discovered that he could fill his never-ending thirst for change and excitement by pursuing his interest outside of his day job and starting his own podcast and a company with a friend. This gave him the best of both worlds, enjoying his secure day-to-day job as well as pursuing all of these other interests. Pretty cool, right? Here's the advice Travis gives.
I think the best advice that I was given was, you might not be able to see the last step, but can you see the next step? And taking that next step. And if you can't see the next step, then you need to do some more clarification about what you're doing right now and the direction you're headed and what's important to you. And you have to believe that the step after that will appear. And it's something that you have to commit to yourself and realize that you are the only you in this world, and you're the only one that has a certain set of experiences and education and spirit that you have, and you're the only one that can deliver the impact that you're meant to deliver in this world. And if you don't show up, the world isn't as a bright a place. And you have to show up in order to make that happen. And once you know your value and know that you are important and that you matter, and that the world's waiting for you to show up, it creates this new level of almost camaraderie with the world, or like the sense of purpose, or it's motivating. It's like, oh my gosh, what? And then I get excited around, what is that? The journey and the excitement of discovery and figuring out what it is that I'm going to do and what's the impact that I'm going to make and how can I change somebody's life today? is kind of a motivating thing that re-inspires me. And when I'm having these days where I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to show up. I don't want to get up. I don't want to be involved. It gives you this new breath of fresh air, a little wind under your wings, as it were, to be able to get up and show up. So I think that my biggest advice is to show up for yourself. Know that you're worth it. Know that your value in the world is important, and we need you to authentically show up as yourself in order to change the world. Look for the next step. And beyond that, don't worry about it. Take the next step.
Aaron had originally went to school to become an attorney, got his JD, and then promptly went into construction management when he thought that law just was not going to be in the cards for him. Well, after being in construction management for years, in fact, over a decade, he was miserable. He was beyond miserable. He began contemplating some pretty scary things if it meant he could just get out of work. And to make things worse, this wasn't any old job where he felt like he could quit. It was his family's business. Aaron decided it was time to take agency over his career for the first time in his life. He worked up the courage to talk to his boss, aka Dad, about leaving the company and began pursuing a career in a totally different industry. In this case, law. A really interesting note about Aaron's situation too is that he actually combined together all of the knowledge that he'd accumulated in construction management and leveraged it going into law to find a role that really was an amazing fit for him. After doing that, what advice would he give? Here you go.
Well, one, it's baby steps, right? Like it starts very small. So you don't have to continue being a version of you that you don't like. I mean, it changes and it's gradual, but even a month later, you look back, it's like, wow, I'm different. And it's easy to look at all the things that need to change in order for me to feel like I have my life in order or feel like I'm satisfied with my career or my family, my house, whatever it is. But those are always going to stay the same unless you do something about it. And it can be 20 minutes, prove to yourself that you can do something that scares you, or I don't know, because you can. You absolutely can do the thing that you're afraid of. And the consequences of doing something and failing are where you're at. And if you're unhappy with that, try. But that is the kernel of it for me, is that all of the stories that you're telling yourself about what can go wrong if you do something, in all likelihood, the worst case is where you're at.
Okay, this episode was chock full of advice from people that have been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and includes many factors that you might not have thought would be incredibly important. The type of unconventional advice that you heard is what I've included in our book. And in fact, it's what led me to write the book, Happen to Your Career, an unconventional approach to career change and meaningful work, which you can find on Amazon or any other major book reseller, or you can get the audiobook on Audible. And if you love this episode, then I would encourage you to do that. It will give you even more information on all the things that you didn't know that are going to be critical for your career change so that you can kickstart your journey. Okay, here's a sneak peek into what's coming up next week, right here on Happen to Your Career.
And she said, hey, it sounds like you're doing a lot of really cool things and you're doing a lot of cool, like little steps to get to where you are. She was like, but don't be afraid to take that big step.
This probably won't entirely come as a surprise to you, but we found that when you start doing the work to make a big change, like specifically a career change, those big moves bleed into every other area of your life. And if this is not your first episode of the podcast, you've probably heard this many times before when we talk about people who have made changes in their work, and it influences them to play big in the rest of their life. Like in episode 483, where Kate Gleason Bachman pivoted out of her lifelong career as a nurse and then went on to complete her first ultra marathon, not just a regular marathon, but ultra marathon. Pretty cool, right? Another client used career experiments to connect to people, and then those people changed her life. All that and plenty more next week right here on Happen to Your Career. Make sure that you don't miss it. And if you haven't already, click subscribe on your podcast player so that you can download this podcast in your sleep and you get it automatically, even the bonus episodes, every single week, sometimes multiple times a week. Until next week, adios. I'm out.